On first down, they hand off to Marlon Mack. Huge hole, 50-yard line. He's at the 40, still going near sideline. He's at the 10. He's at the 5, and he will score. Touchdown, Marlon Mack. Touchdown, INDY. And again, it's picked off. It's Darius Leonard. Leonard with a second INT, and he's streaking down the near sideline. He's at the 40. He's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's going to go. A pick six for the Maniac. Kenny Moore gets to Deshaun Watson. That's a sack for Kenny Moore. Kenny has a pick and now a sack in the game.
Horseshoe is back, baby. The horseshoe is back.
Welcome back to another edition of the Bring the Juice podcast. I'm your co-host, as always, Cody Felger, and joining me, Andrew Thomason. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Cody. How are you?
Good, man. Good. So I wanted to talk about on this podcast, the Colts just announced here a little less than an hour ago that they had signed actually former Notre Dame defensive lineman Sheldon Day. He was a guy that originally was a fourth-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2016. Day is a guy who a little bit undersized as a defensive lineman in terms of height. He's 6'1", 285 pounds. Formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, so there's obviously that connection there. Played with DeForest Buckner last year on that very stout defensive line of the 49ers. He didn't start, but he played some significant snaps there. He's still a pretty young player. He's only 25. Pro Football Focus actually rated him as 115th best interior defender. He had posted a 60.6 grade, which is pretty decent. I guess, Andrew, so talking about this move here, it's the third move the Colts have made in free agency, the second on the defensive line. What do you think, man, this that the Colts are trying to do here? What kind of message are the Colts trying to send to their players, to their fans by making this kind of signing?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying to send a message that says you win football games by being dominant up front. And I know Sheldon Day might not be the splashiest signing, if that makes sense, but production-wise, I'm looking at some of his numbers here. Since coming into the league in 2016, he has a total of 6 sacks. Last year with the 49ers, he had 5 assisted tackles and 15 combined tackles total. So when he comes in, he's fairly productive. I sort of see him filling in sort of as a backup 3 technique to maybe Autry and Buckner when Buckner comes out on certain plays. Overall, I think it's a great signing. He's 25 years old, and I think he's going to provide quality depth for the Colts defensive front.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of looks like he was primarily more of a run stopper. So, maybe he plays that one technique behind Grover Stewart as well. He certainly got the size to be able to do that. But nonetheless, it's definitely a signing that is a solid depth signing. I don't see him overtaking Stewart for that one technique starting position. He's the guy, man, that's obviously a little bit undersized for a defensive tackle. But, with some of those guys, you normally see guys that win on effort. A lot of guys that are, maybe not the biggest guys in the world. They can't overpower people or whatever. They can't win with pure size, but they find other ways to win. They find other ways to make plays and be disruptive. And so he certainly seems like a guy like that who's a young player, definitely an upgrade from Margus Hunt in terms of just what he brings to this defense, just more depth on that defensive line, I guess. And that kind of leads me to the next question I have for you, Andrew. With this signing now, do you think this means that the Colts are kind of done addressing that defensive line here in free agency? Because really, if you look at it, I mean, they have Justin Houston, they have DeForest Buckner, they have Danico Autry, they have Kamoko Toure, Ben Banogu, Grover Stewart. What do you think this kind of means for this Colts defensive line in free agency? And does this change at all maybe their draft strategy in terms of drafting defensive linemen? Do you think it kind of pushes defensive tackle, if you had that kind of nose tackle position at any, in your top 5 list, do you think that kind of pushes it off for you? And does it change the Colts draft approach at all, or is it just kind of more just a depth signing?
No, I think it changes your draft perspective going into April, and the reason I say that is similar to the reason that you just said, Cody. They have Justin Houston, Danigo Autry, Banagoo, Teray, and now Sheldon Day, and Buckner as well, excuse me. So they have plenty of, and Grover Stewart as well. My apologies there. They have plenty of talent and quality players up front. And honestly, they haven't really done much on offense other than Philip Rivers, this free agency, particularly at receiver. We noticed that Devin Funchess signed with the, I can't think of the team off the top of my head right now, but I know
I
he's elsewhere
believe
now.
it was the Packers. Yeah, he wanted to play with
The
Rodgers.
Packers. Right, that's right. Thank you. That it was the Packers, and
Hmm.
quality signing for them. But in my opinion, it's a not a detrimental loss, if that makes sense, but it's certainly a loss because the Colts, up until, or at least last year, Funchess was considered, at least for that one game, that big bodied receiver that can go up and catch those 50-50 balls. And we know that Philip Rivers has had
Hmm.
a lot of success throwing to those type of receivers in the past, Mike Williams being the name that comes to mind. So just to answer your initial question, yeah, I think it changes the draft strategy. I think they look more towards the offensive side of the ball, the receiver, tight end, in the draft rather than focusing on the defensive line.
Shameless plug. I just dropped a video earlier about my first mock draft, and I have the Colts doing a lot of things on offense. So be sure to go check that one out. One guy that I forgot to mention, also Tyquan Lewis on that defensive line, but yeah, and one thing that I think is interesting that Day can kind of bring to you from a defensive line standpoint, similar to Buckner here, he actually started all three of San Francisco's playoff games last season. So he has playoff starting experience. And he's just a guy that provides more of that veteran leadership in terms of, yeah, he's not very old, but he's a guy, I mean, compared to a majority of your roster, he is a guy that's probably seen some of the most playoff success out of anybody on your roster currently. And so I think he's just a guy that provides some leadership and knows, working with the 49ers, that vaunted defensive line, knowing what it takes to be a successful and dominant unit. I just think, it's this move. Yeah, he's a decent player, but I think in terms of mindset, this helps this Colts defensive line mindset, this defense as a whole, to know we have some guys who know what it takes to get to that point, get to the Super Bowl. So it's just, I think it's a good signing in terms of production, but it's also a good signing as well with just leadership and just getting guys in there who can kind of, exhibit, and people can watch. Some of these young guys can watch, the work that it takes to become a Super Bowl caliber team. And so that's kind of what I see from this move. I like this move a lot, especially since it's more, getting younger on that defensive line, which we've talked about a lot. We feel like the Colts want to do that maybe at corner as well. That's why they cut ties with Pierre Desir, who's going to be 30 coming up here soon. So I have no problems with this move. I think it's probably just a good depth move because, like we talked about on the offensive line, and like Chris Ballard has talked about on the offensive line, it rings true for the defensive line as well, in terms of you need bodies and you need guys where the drop off's not going to be tremendous from the starter to the backup. Yeah, there obviously will be a difference because one guy's starting, but you just have guys that can consistently rotate in there that are being productive and making plays. And I think Day's a guy that definitely, in kind of a backup kind of spot duty type of role, can really be a good piece for this defense. So I'm all about the move. Andrew, do you have anything else to say about this move? Anything else interesting tidbits there you found on Day?
And I'm not sure if we brought this up, but other than the fact that he went to Warren Central and was at Notre Dame as well,
Yeah.
he's coming home, so I'm sure he's real excited to be back where he grew up and where he played high school football and college ball as well. We're glad to have him, and I totally agree with you. I think this is a tremendous signing, and I look forward to seeing what he can provide come August.
Does this change your, I know the Colts have been rumored to potentially be in the running for Jadeveon Clowney. I don't really know how accurate that is, but if the Colts were in the running for Jadeveon Clowney, would this impact that at all, do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I think it would, and I think not really for the reasons that you may think. Sheldon Day, we've talked about already being sort of a backup sort of player, filling in a need, obviously. Um, to have more bodies, as you had mentioned, like Chris Ballard has religiously stated. But with Jadeveon Clowney, I know the word on the NFL street, if you will, has been that he's looking for a short-term deal, and the Colts may jump all over that. But I would be surprised at this point with the amount of depth the players in the defensive line, all the guys that we've already mentioned, if the Colts were to go after a player like Clowney, because yeah, you may sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal and he may be fairly productive for you, but you just gave Buckner that really large extension, and Clowney is looking to find somewhere where a team can maybe see him for a season or two and then give him a long-term extension. And although the Colts may have the cap space, I'm not sure if Chris Ballard is wanting to pay a player, even of Clowney's caliber, DeForest Buckner kind of money.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. And also forgot to mention this deal with Sheldon Day is only a 1 year deal. So if things don't pan out, you can let him walk next off season. But if he's a productive backup player for you, why not bring him back for depth purposes? Young player still has a lot to give you there. So, okay. Well, I like this move. I think you like this move. This is a pretty solid depth signing for the Colts. Their third free agent signing of the 2020 offseason. It'll be interesting, Andrew, to see what the Colts do. And if they continue to add some guys there, maybe some more depth guys like they did with Sheldon Day, they continue to just add some guys who are younger, who could potentially contribute, maybe not in starting roles, but maybe in backup roles, and just start building up this depth first on the lines and then maybe on some other positions as well. But okay, I think that does it for this podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this signing. Kind of give us your letter grade on what you think. I would give this one probably a solid B, just because he's not a guy that's going to probably make a huge impact. But he's a solid depth player. And yeah, I just think that he's a solid signing, not a great signing. I like the 1 year deal. What grade would you give this, Andrew, before I wrap this up?
I'm right there with you, Cody. I'd give it a B. I know this. I said this was a tremendous signing a few minutes ago. And maybe tremendous is too big of a word, and that's not a shot or an indictment on Sheldon Day. But he's a young player, like you said. He brings quality, veteran leadership in the role of what it takes to potentially get to a Super Bowl, be a Super Bowl caliber team, as you mentioned earlier. So I'd give it a solid B. I like the signing a lot as well.
Yeah. Well, let us know in the comments what grade you guys would give the Sheldon Day signing for the Indianapolis Colts. For Andrew and myself, thank you guys so much, and go Colts.